Tell me about the creating of the statement of purpose. What was that all about, and why did you do it?
Well, we decided that we would put together what we came to call the Statement of Purpose in 1986. And what brought us to that, I think more than anything, was the amount of change going on in the company at that time, particularly with respect to the number of new employees. We had gone ahead with the acquisition of Richardson Vicks, which of course brought in many new employees all around the world. We were also getting feedback, I was getting feedback, that we weren't altogether clear on what our purpose and principles were. Although there was no doubt about the consumer being our major focus, and certainly we all knew that products were king and queen, but to articulate it in a way that could be shared with the entire company, and combining with that purpose a statement of values and principles, which we had all heard about in speeches, frankly, which probably explained why we were with the company. But we felt it would be good to record that. And of course, this was right at our 150th anniversary, too, which was a good occasion to move ahead with it. So I was at the time president of the company, and we launched that, and John Smale was the CEO, and he embraced it. And we had a lot of different people working on it to put it together. It took what I thought was an eternity. It was probably 3 or 4 months, but it seemed like an eternity as we labored over every word. But I must say I am enormously lifted by its continuity in our culture as a beacon, if you will, for what we aim to do. And it stood the test of time pretty well. We've changed a few things in it, but what we stood for then, we still stand for. And in fact, we had stood for it before, but embedding it in this statement, I think, was valuable.
In creating the statement of purpose, tell us about the key elements of its construction and its content. Like, which parts came most readily and why?
The first paragraph came most readily. There was no issue at all that we would be starting with anything other than the fact that we were going to serve consumers through our products, and the world's consumers, which was ever more evident because by the mid 1980s, we had become a much more global company. So we started right there, that our very fundamental purpose was to improve the lives of the world's consumers through superior brands, and since then we've added services that meet the needs of the world's consumers, full stop, period. And we probably worked some time on exactly the sequence of words and the choice, but there was never any doubt about that first paragraph. Nor was there any doubt about what we would have flow from that, because we wanted to indicate it was from doing that, through providing products that provide new benefits, better benefits to consumers around the world. From that would flow leadership in shares, leadership in volume growth, leadership in profits, and to which we've now added leadership in value creation. And that was very intentional. We wanted to make it clear that while we have to have good value and good profit, that this would flow from superior brands that provide better benefits to consumers. And without that, you could forget all the rest. Without that superiority of benefits, new benefits, that would build brands and, in fact, create whole new categories of business, which we have done to an amazing degree. Young people in the company may not fully appreciate that it was through the innovation, technological innovation, design innovation, which really accounts for the fact that the tissue towel market is what it is today in the United States, or that we have a hair care category that looks anything like the one does today, rather than a bunch of commodity products. Or that Pampers, disposable diapers, now are being used in most developed countries, all homes. That wasn't the case before Pampers. Or that a new level of protection for women and feminine hygiene has been produced by forming a form film top sheet, which didn't exist before. The creation of Always. Could go on in whole new categories created as we created a leadership brand in that category. So that came next in the second paragraph. And then the third paragraph I really liked because we recognized that in providing this superior growth in volume and profit and value creation, there would be a lot of people who'd benefit from that. There'd be a lot of people who'd benefit from that. Who? Our employees, we're all shareholders, all our shareholders, most of whom aren't employees, and our communities would benefit from our being profitable. We could do more in our communities. If we're not profitable, we're not going to be much help to anybody. So I think we had the sequence right, and I'm delighted that still remains that way, and it's important for us to remember it. None of these things go on automatic. You can't only have a superior product and then assume you'll have superior value creation. You've got to do other things too. But we should never forget that without that superior product providing a new benefit, a better benefit, something like Tide Pods, what we've just introduced, always discreet, if we aren't doing that, none of the rest will follow. And that has to be in our blood. That conviction has to be in our blood, as it would be in anybody's blood who's been around this company as long as I have.
So shareholder value and value creation isn't an automatic thing, to be clear.
No, shareholder value creation isn't an automatic thing. It requires the predicate is a superior product, providing better benefits, well marketed, but then it requires great efficiency in our total supply system, manufacturing, engineering, be able to get higher throughput. We will win in the unit dose market, first and foremost, because we have a better design, better performing product. But another reason we're going to win, at least as I understand it, is we have engineering capability and manufacturing capability that our competitors don't have. We'd never have the tissue towel business that we have today if we hadn't integrated any number of things, starting with CPN, CPF technology, of course, but then just the sheer work in every manufacturing plant and efficiencies. The idea of the person who came up with the idea of bulk packs on Bounty, hugely controversial. View at the time, nobody will buy that. Women can't carry it or men can't carry it out of the store. Stores won't stock it. And yet, as we all know, it dramatically increased the consumption in the total category and made it easier for people. So no, it requires tight work on every front, finance, marketing efficiencies, brilliant positioning of the brand, of course. Yeah, they all have to come together in order to get superior shareholder return. But let us never forget where it starts. In the product, based on knowing what consumers need. Sometimes they may not fully know it yet, using our own imagination to foresee that and do something that, as I always like to say, will have consumers say, I need that. Kind of like the iPad was when it came out. I want that. Where do I buy it? And how fast can I get it? That's the reaction we want for our products.
You mentioned a moment ago, the multi-packs being hugely controversial. Tell me a little bit about that. About just when a product idea, something is introduced and there's disagreement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, sure I can. The examples are just all over the place. The Olay Total Effects is one great example. Here you come with a product that it's recommended that we ought to be selling it at close to $20, 2 times the highest price that we've ever had on another Olay product. And the litany of reasons that wouldn't work were endless. Too expensive, stores, customers won't like it, people won't buy it. And yet it had that integrated package, never had anything like that before, that push-down cap, and in the formula itself and the positioning of it, something that became a $100 million business in 15 months and catapulted Olay to leadership. And one other innovation after another in Olay, whitening, took that brand from $250 million when we bought it from RVI to over $3 billion. It's $3 billion, a 10-fold increase out of innovation, much of it very controversial. The idea of Olay going into personal cleansing was absolutely rejected again and again. And it only happened because some folks in R&D and marketing and wherever they were said, this is what the consumer wants and we can provide a better product. And that's part of the Olay franchise, and we should do it. Of course, 2-in-1 shampoos is a classic example where Ray Bullock and I'm sure many others see. I know a few names, and in those few names I miss heroes and heroines, back there at the bench that I never knew, who Ray, if he were here, he'd say, but you forgot this person, you forgot that person. But hugely controversial. The whole idea of 2-in-1 had so many skeletons around from previous attempts that most people would say don't try that again. The whole idea of combining a shampoo and conditioner was extraordinarily complex, took years, one formulation after another. One time there was too much gunk, the other time it didn't clean. They got it right, and still, at the end of the day there, it was still a very small blind test winner. And I'll always remember Gordon Brunner and Franco Spadini and Seal Kuzma, at least as I understand the story. I was the president. I don't think I was in this meeting, where Gordon went to John Smale and he said to John, we've got to have this. We've got to put it in test market. This small blind test win, it's much more than that. And on we went into Seattle, taking what we thought was a very modest risk, and indeed it was, putting it on PERT Plus, which we had already fouled up so much that we could hardly do more damage. It was a 3 share, and all of a sudden it went to a 5 share. And there we were, to take a business, a shampoo business that we almost considered getting out of, other than Head & Shoulders, which we might have moved over to healthcare, because there was nothing to it. There was no return, nothing distinctive. And we recreated that whole category. And came upon Pantene, and then a better Head & Shoulders. And Head & Shoulders all of a sudden becomes a brand that our general managers around the world want. Prior to that, when I was in international, when I was in Europe, you couldn't get a general manager to take Head & Shoulders on a bet. They didn't want that dog. It wouldn't do well. Maybe they'd get a 3 share. That would be good. They didn't need that. Then Head & Shoulders becomes the number 2 shampoo brand in the world. Again, because of great positioning, too. Wonderful work by Leo Burnett Advertising Agency, but it came from that innovation. I can remember one around Tide with bleach. How hard it was to stabilize bleach in the cooler wash water temperatures that exist in the United States. I can't tell you about it. I'm no technician, but I was close enough to it to know how hard it was and how challenging and how hard we had to work. And then we had the big question of what are we going to call it? This was really funny. We wanted to get something other than bleach. We thought that was just too generic. We came up with all these fancy words, extra brighteners or whatever. Finally, women told us, why don't you just tell us what it is? Bleach. We were afraid of that. We thought, well, that'll scare everybody. That didn't scare anybody. Simply put us on another road to victory on Tide. Let me say a word on Tide, because Tide, to me, if I had to pick the single brand that I'm most proud of for what the company's done over time, and there's so many I could pick. Pampers right now with a 9-point share advantage versus Kimberly-Clark in this country. Boy, I love that. But I would pick Tide. To think that it today has a 40 share, an all-time share high, as I understand it in value, in this country, North America, after hundreds of brands have attacked it. And there it is. And yet we have to recognize, and young folks in the company need to recognize, we lost 25% of our share on Tide 2 times. It's true. 25% of our share, if you go back to the mid-50s to today, there were 2 periods of time where from where we were to where we ended up at that point in time, we dropped 25%. Can you imagine the trauma in this company as we lost 25% of our share on Tide? It was ugly. I mean, I can't remember it all other than we were pulling our hair out and probably beating up on ourselves and each other. But we never lost faith. And we came back each time, and we came back in the classic way. We came back with major product innovation, well-positioned and well-supported by CBD and everybody. The first time around it was enzymes. That was in the 60s. That, too, was controversial. We're going to put enzymes in the product? We've got to be sure of sensitization. We were. We lost it again in the 70s. And then we came back, as everyone would know, with 2 major innovations. Finally, Tide Liquid, screwing up our courage to do what we should have done years before, recognized that the standard we needed to meet was not to be better than powder Tide in every single respect, but to be better than every liquid in every important respect, which we did. We went ahead. The rest is history. By far the leader. We knocked out Whisk that had been a plague in our sides for years. They're essentially gone. They had been the leader for years, 7-8 share. And then we followed that with Tide with bleach. And I can't catalog all the innovations since then that have been important. Carazyme, Fabric Care Technologies, cold water technologies, all along the way, boom, 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 boom. And then we come along here with Unidose, one of the truly brilliant executions, hugely controversial, as I understand it. And why wouldn't it be? We had Unidose products on Tide when I joined the company in 1963. Folks listening to this will be too young to remember it or know it, but we had Tide Ready packs in a powder in a cellophane bag. You threw it in to your wash, and if you were lucky, it actually dissolved. Didn't do it all the time, that's why it didn't work. And then years later, we had Salvo. That didn't work, didn't dissolve very well. Then we had multi-action sheets on Tide in another generation in the 80s. That had a lot in it, detergent, bleach. Again, not the right execution, but we didn't give up on the concept, and we kept watching the demographics. And it became clear that the demographics, even more today than before perhaps, made a consumer need in the Unidose area. And above all, we improved the technology and the performance. And to be able to do this compartmentalization of the different ingredients, put it in a pristine design that you really felt good about holding, and when it would go and it worked. We have an 80 share of the Unidose market right now, I'm told, in North America. And I plead for us to not lose it. We're entitled to that 80 share. And that section will grow, and it will grow and grow. And if we do our work right in innovation and marketing and everything, we will hold that 80 share by providing better performance.
You know, I'm listening to you. How do you get to a winning place in the midst of all this difficulty?
Well, you talk about different opinions, arguments going on, disagreements. I think getting to a winning place, as I think about particular ones, has involved two things. Having a very thorough, open airing of the different points of view around a table. Not through memos, certainly not through emails, though they'll have their place perhaps in setting the options. But in getting together around a table and having a respectful but tough-minded conversation on the puts and calls and how, if there's an honest difference of opinion, we're going to resolve it through some perhaps additional piece of evidence. The most heated discussion I've ever been in involving R&D and marketing surrounded the decision whether to go to Shape diapers, Shape Pampers. We were already with Love's. Huggies was out. And I'd just come back from Europe in 1984. The decision was still on the plate as to whether to leave rectangular Pampers and go to Shape or not. And there must have been 60 people in the room somewhere, I don't know where it was, Winton Hill, Sharon Woods, wherever the lab was at that time. And R&D was split. There were senior people in R&D, who I need not name, who felt we should stay with rectangular, believe it or not. Greater area, marketing was doing a poor job, we weren't marketing it right. There was another group, led, as I recall, by Dave Roberts, who believed in the part of it. We had to go Shape right away. We were already too late. I'd never experienced anything like this. I mean, this was heated. Strong points of view. So what I decided to do, and I don't make this sound like this decided the case, I said, I got to go hear from some consumers. I want focus group interviews. And I'd just gotten back. So we set up 3 focus group interviews out in the Swifton Shopping Center. And I think it was the very next night, maybe the same night, when I heard from one group of Kimberly-Clark Huggies users, one group of Pampers-only users, and then one split. And I came out of that focus group interview in a cold sweat. The Huggies users, there is no way they would change. They had discovered nirvana, and they would not change. The Pampers users, they were hanging on because we were giving them a lot of coupons. And the people who were switching, I don't know, 80% of them. So I came out and said, this is really easy. This is really easy. I think about that on a decision where we didn't have this airing. Probably the single one I most regret. And that is the failure to have pursued of pull-up pants at the same time that we focused single-mindedly on going ahead to expand the Shape Pampers, which we did right after that. And of course, we were way behind. We were losing share, I don't know, 3 or 4 points a month. So we, all of us, I wanted to get out with that Shaped Pampers, ASAP, top quality rollout. We had alongside over here this thing pull up. And it was recommended, and I agreed, that we would delay that for a year and then come behind it. Well, as we know, as the history would show, during that year, Kimberly-Clark comes out with a whole raft of patents, which we've been spending decades overcoming. I feel terrible about that. Now, what's my point? If I was at that time responsible for the U.S. business, had said, wait a minute, this is a pretty big decision. We're talking about Pampers. We're talking about what could be, even though we think it costs so much, not many people want to buy it, and we'd probably have a year. And yes, we must make the Shape diaper effective. Maybe we ought to sit down and have a real discussion on this. And I will bet you if I had done that, there would have been somebody in R&D that would have said, Pepper, don't you dare hold up on this. Don't dare make the assumption that this won't be a big market because it happens to cost 2 times or 3 times what the cost of Pampers is. Don't dare do that. You go ahead and get that at least so we can secure our patent position. Oh, I wish I had done that. There are others like that. So what am I getting at in terms of principle to your very, very good question? That's being sure we've had a full airing when you get to a big one. Don't miss the big ones. And when you're on a big one, have an open discussion of it and allow the contrary point of view to come through. Not only allow it, invite it. Invite the contrary point of view so it can be considered. And don't allow ever anyone to feel because the freight train's running real fast down here, I better not speak up or I'm not going to be seen as being on board. We rely on people to speak up, and I've been saved by it again and again by people speaking up. We were wrestling with the Tampax acquisition. Ed Fogarty had come to me when I was CEO, I guess. And he said, John, we want to sell the Tampax business, and you're the only company we want to sell it to. Well, I thought, that's a great compliment, and it's a great brand. But do we want to get back into the feminine shirt business? And we were leaning to do it. But I got this wonderful phone call from Mary Jensen and Carolyn Burkholz, who I had met Mary. I didn't know Carolyn. She calls me in my office, and she says, I'd like to speak to you. I think you're worrying about whether we ought to acquire Tampax, she said, because of the prior history, the safety. I don't know if it was Mary or Carolyn, but whoever it was, I said, you are absolutely right. I am really, that's the big issue on my mind. She said, I want you to relax on that, and I want us two to come and tell you why you should. So they come up to my office, in the general office, and they sit down, they have all this material. And they say, we want you to know, ever since we removed Rely from the market, we have been studying this market like we are in it. In fact, we've been advising other people, competitors, what they ought to be doing on usage instructions to make sure that women are safe. And we can tell you we monitor the Tampax products, and provided you don't change it without great clinical evidence, you can go ahead and be assured that it's safe. That sealed the deal for me. We probably were going to go ahead. We probably were enough convinced, but that sealed the deal. I don't know what got me onto that. Well, but it's a story I'll never forget of somebody taking the initiative and coming forward. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that at all. But they cared a lot. They cared a lot. And
it sounds like you value people speaking into your life to where it benefits you. How important is it? And I've heard that vulnerability is being described as allowing people to speak into your life. How important is it for a leader to allow people to speak into their lives?
You ask how important it is for a leader to allow people to be open, vulnerable themselves? Absolutely vital. It's the only basis on which trustful communication can take place. A person has to be able to feel. They not only can, but they're expected to and will be appreciated for disclosing exactly how they feel. Well, I don't mean every single thought on any subject, but on something they think is important, and not feel vulnerable or judged because what they say may not be in accord with what the other person feels or the thing. I'm not saying that's always easy, but the great leaders that I've known have done that. And they've done it with me, John Smale, Ed Arzt. I could go down the list, Wahib Zaki, Gordon. What you see is what you get. I love to hear it said, what you see is what you get. I mean, maybe everybody you know, what you see is what you get. Maybe you won't like it, but it'll be a rare thing in Procter & Gamble that you won't like it. No, you have to be open, and you have to feel you can be yourself and not be judged by it, but you're just doing what is right, and you're being at your best. And that's what you owe to yourself, and that's what you owe to the consumer, and that's what you owe to this business and to your fellow employees.
And you mentioned product superiority a lot. Which is more important, product superiority or cost savings?
Product superiority. Product superiority is more important. We're good at cost savings. I don't mean to make it's like falling off a log. But we need things that people go home and write about, that they check it off. They don't think which detergent you're going to buy anymore. I buy Tide. I buy Crest. Consumers got a lot of things to think about today. Getting kids to a soccer game, 2 jobs. We want to make life easier. And the way we do it is by providing a product that is just so consistent, good value, that you can kind of take it out of your mind of choices. We get to do that on certain of our brands. Bounty is pretty clearly in that, Pampers. But that's the ultimate mark here, is that a person who's come to see it is so much part of their home and so consistently first with the best, and yes, a good value, and it doesn't let me down, that you buy it. So there, that's the starting point. Of course, we have to have, quote, cost savings. We have to have a good value. We know that. Or Carter's of value can afford a premium because you're this much better. But listen, more than half the people in this country haven't even had an increase in their disposable income for 10 years. This is not easy. But the choice, when you pose it so clear, simply, product superiority, cost savings, you start with the product superiority. It's where you got to be. And I've often felt, the big test coming in with R&D, and we have new innovations, we've got to be sure we don't put financial metrics on it too soon. Because if we come up with a really big idea, we come up with a Swiffer, we come up with Febreze, we come up with a technology that permits an always discreet, we're pretty darn good at then figuring out over time. Sometimes it takes us longer than we'd like. We probably get frustrated sometimes, but we're darn good. Our R&D, our manufacturing, engineering, our purchasing people, we're good at this. But we can't compromise the quality, and we've got to start with a boffo idea. That's the real thing. Is it big? Is it a game changer? Can it create a new category? That's the big deal. And if you try to measure ROIs before you even know how big it is, we'll all be wandering around a little box and not have the time to ideate and make it big, and then find out, is it really big, and then go to work on a financial platform that makes sense. But don't get the cart before the horse. I'm not sure that's the right analogy, but you get the idea.
Yeah. What would happen to P&G if creating superior products were no longer a priority?
You're kidding me. What would happen to P&G if creating superior products was no longer a priority? A good question is that we'd be dead in the water. First, a lot of people would probably end up leaving the company because it would no longer be the company they know it to be. I'd sell all my stock. I still got quite a bit. I'd get out quick. It's impossible to think that way. However, let me not treat your question totally lightly, because there are a lot of winds blowing in a company at any point in time. There is the need for cost savings, efficiencies, productivity, all of that, and it is absolutely needed. But let us not ever allow ourselves to get in a situation where we don't only say superior products are important, but that we know it's our absolute lifeblood and that we demand it. It isn't something we'd like to have, or we'll have it in as many brands as we can get, or we'll get it sometime in the future, even though sometimes it only can come in the future. We have to demand it. I have a scale here that I won't lift up because it's too heavy, but it contains some brands, many brands I worked on in Europe, and it contains a statement that I made in May of 1984, 30 years ago, in Europe. And it was my last meeting when I'd been running P&G Europe. And Peter Morris, who was running R&D at the time over there, liked it so much, he wrote it down and he inscribed it on a little plaque on this thing they gave me when I left. I don't know if they were just glad to see me go, but they gave me a nice scale. But what this statement says, and this was me talking, and I won't get it exactly right because I'm not going to bend down and read it, but it says, everyone pays lip service to superior product performance. That's what it said. Everyone pays lip service to superior product performance. However, I said, I have learned in my past 4 years in Europe that without superior product performance, we cannot grow our business and can grow our profits. We cannot do it. And as I look back, what I was reflecting on then, in particular, were some failures. What I was reflecting on Ariel, where we had been making really good progress against innovation. I was reflecting on Always, which we were just expanding, and it was just going into France, built market leadership almost overnight against really tough competitors. I mean, you think of Always. If you want an example of product performance on both sides, think of Always. Now, what do I mean? Right now, we have market shares on Always of over 50%. North America, UK, long list. Russia, 52% in Russia. However, we have shares that are less than 10. We have single-digit shares in Japan and in China. Now, that's kind of unbelievable. With 50 shares in most of the world, we're the leader with almost a 30 share, and yet we have single-digit shares, including in Japan, where Whisper saved our business. We wouldn't have a business of the kind we have if Whisper hadn't come in, and yet we lost it. And why did we lose it? I can't give you a full answer. I don't know. I wasn't there. I just learned these facts a couple weeks ago. But basically, we lost it because we didn't have the right product performance relative to Unicharm in those key markets. I look at them as enormous opportunities today because I have no doubt in China. China right now is the number 2 volume share, volume in total tonnage of P&G, feminine protection anywhere in the world, and yet we only have a 4 share. 5 share. Can you imagine what it'll be when we get back to a 40 share in China? Can you imagine? I look forward to that, and that's the way I look at that number. But it tells a story, and enormous importance. We've gone through on Pampers in Japan. It's been like a up and down based on whether we have it or whether we don't have it. Same thing here right now. We come out with Pampers Swaddlers. We are killing Kimberly-Clark. Because we're serving consumers better, and we expand Swaddlers across sizes 3, 4, and 5 instead of just 1 and 2. Better product, 8.7 percentage point advantage. I love this stuff, and it shows the importance. Not only, I don't want to say only R&D, but it starts there, and then it has to be well marketed. And we need great teamwork, as we all know, between R&D, marketing, engineering, manufacturing, sales, CBD.
Could you provide your thoughts on the role and importance of courage?
Let me take your question more broadly, and I'll come to courage. You ask what are the characteristics of R&D leaders that I have found to be most important in impacting the business and in being the example, teachers of other young people coming up, as they're both equally vital. I would start with commitment. I would start with the word commitment. the R&D leaders, and I've known many of them, have an absolute burning commitment to achieve superiority in the performance of the brand. And I mean unyielding. Like, we're not going to sleep at night. We're going to turn over every leaf. We're going to let nothing not be done to understand where that superiority should lie and to make it happen. I think I learned this maybe first and most from Wahib Zaki. He was tireless. He was a tyrant in his insistence that we do that. I see the same thing in Gordon Brunner. I saw the same thing in Franco Spazzini. It isn't a style. I mean, Wahib had a style that was very, very aggressive. That's not true of everyone. So I'm not making a style comment here. I'm making that burning commitment that this is what we're here for. I've often felt our role in life as a company, why we exist as a company, is to provide benefits better benefits through our products. That's why we are here. Also, I'd say to provide a great place of employment and a reward from everything that follows as we talk the statement of purpose. But the single most important trait of the most effective R&D leaders is this absolute burning commitment. Now, with that commitment flows a number of other things. Passion, time on it, but comes also something you referenced earlier, courage. I'm not sure that the best or strongest R&D leaders I've known so many, would describe what they actually were doing as being courageous. In many cases, I think they were just doing their thing and doing what they felt was right. Though I will say that in many cases, I haven't seen it as being courageous as I've experienced it. And it's calling it like they see it, and if they see we're not doing the right thing to make it happen, just as Gordon Brunner said to John Smale, John, I want you to take this into test market. This is a direct request I'm making of you, asking for the order. Did Gordon feel it took courage to do that? I'd rather doubt it. He almost felt I just wouldn't be me if I didn't do this. But whatever you call it, it flows from this thing that we have this opportunity, this requirement to make a difference in this business by serving consumers better, and we have a technology here that could be a big idea, and we are not going to let it go. We are not going to let it go. And I am going to lay out my view on this just as clearly and persuasively as I can. And if the answer comes back no, I will come back again with more evidence if I believe it's really that important. I often tell the story of Bob Haxby and Paul Trokin on CPN, I believe it was CPN, when we were investing tens of millions of dollars in this process. And we know we needed it. I think our share on Bounty at the time was in the mid-20s. Our return on investment was approaching zero. John Smale had declared we will never build another paper machine. And we were in one of these blue book or red book meetings. I can't recall what color the book was, but I know we loved these meetings. They were our favorite meetings. And John said, I think it was Bob across the table, no more than 4 feet, Bob, I just don't know how I can agree to this. We were asking for another $10 million or so to keep it going. Belts were breaking in minutes when they needed to run for hours. And Bob Haxby leaned across the table, and I'll never forget his words. John, he said, I want you to trust us. I want you to trust us. We will make this work. Don't give up now. That's what he said. I want you to trust us. We can make this work. Don't give up now. And as you can imagine, we signed the check, and on we went, and on came the technology. It's produced a brand share in the mid-40s, a wonderful profit margin, many new paper machines, and Charmin as well. Many examples like this, not only in R&D, in marketing, establishment of the Walmart team. Tom Mucho came to my office when I was running the U.S. and said, I want to send 28 people to Fayetteville. I said, Tom, you want to do what? We had no people in Fayetteville at the time. No, we should do that. I said, what will they all do? He said, well, HR, sales, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, they'll all be co-opted by Walmart. They'll become Walmart employees. He said, no, you don't understand. They won't. So I agreed to half of them on the spot. 14 went, and then he came back a few months later and asked for the other 14. And what was then a $500 million business is now a $13 billion business. And I think we have 150 people down there, and everybody else has got a Walmart team too. So that you got to stick your neck out. And the biggest regrets I have on business are, well, one I mentioned to you, and that's not having enough dialogue around big choices and going to the consumer to make the vote choice rather than us making it for them. But the other would be not having pushed back hard enough on a couple of decisions, one being the expansion of Pampers in France. But that's another story.
You know, I love that story, that CPN story. I've heard you tell it before. And one of the questions that come to my mind is, as a CEO, and I guess John Smale was the CEO at that time.
Right.
Why was he able to trust Bob Haxby?
Why did John Smale trust Bob Haxby? Why did I? Why do you trust Paul Trocan? Why do you trust Kathy Fish? Two reasons. One, through an accumulation of experience and what you've learned, you know they are really competent. They are really competent. And they are realistic. They're competent and they're realistic. And you know they'd never tell you anything other than what they deeply feel. They are totally transparent. Their integrity rings loud. That's why.
Thank you. What's the most courageous thing you've witnessed? And maybe we don't want to use the word courage, but you know, what's the most courageous thing you've witnessed in P&G R&D?
I think, in the subject of courage, I think if there's so many things that I don't see, I think of the courage that it took to go ahead with FAM through all those years. And again, I don't know if courage is the right word, but it's living by the depth of one's conviction that something big can happen. And what must have been pressures on budgets, unending, to say, no, we must continue. Don't stop. Keep going. Without absolute certainty, it will work. But knowing if it does, it's big, really big, and recognizing that's what we're after is bigness, game-changing, category-creating, something that consumers will say, I'm really glad that happened because my life is better because of that. Form Film Top Sheet, huge struggle. I've talked Tide with bleach, huge struggle. 2-in-1 shampoo, huge struggle. Pringles, making Pringles the great brand it became. Formulation change, being able to improve efficiency, beating Frito-Lay in a blind test when before we lost.
Leadership challenges. What is the role of intuition? We talked about trusting. For a president, for a business president, what's the role of intuition in innovation for a president?
For a president, I think the role of intuition is very big. I think one is bringing all their experience to in life, their own life, with consumers, what they've learned from other people in P&G and R&D, to try to intuit whether the idea could really be big. I think folks who were assessing Swiffer in the beginning had to be using a lot of intuition. Maybe, I don't know what research we had to show that it would be really important, but there had to be intuition that if we could come up with something that would make the whole cleaning task a lot easier, we ought to go ahead with that and see how big it is. And certainly there had to be a lot of intuition around Old Spice. We had labored at Old Spice to try to turn that into something with 3 feet in the past and 1 foot maybe tiptoeing forward for years. And the intuition we could create a brand through the product itself, the fragrances, the design, the advertising that could make it the #1 brand among teenage boys. That had to be intuition. We didn't have the evidence of that yet. In fact, I'm sure we surprised ourselves by how well we did. But there was intuition that we could create something there, and it was very different than anything we'd done before. Yeah, intuition that we could create something of a much better dryness for women and feminine protection and comfort. That's intuition. It's intuition that there's something out there that's not being done. 2-in-1 was intuition. Yeah, there was some evidence from research already that that concept was good, but it was intuition that we could actually go produce something that would actually deliver on this promise of what had been 2-in-1. That was intuition. Steve Jobs brought out iPad. That was intuition. He was told not to do that. And one of the reasons the iPhone came first was, actually the iPad was supposed to be first, but getting with the iPhone, that was a good decision. But the litany was, nobody will want to buy this other thing. They've already got an iPhone, they've got a Mac, iPod. Nobody will want. He had the intuition, and I'm sure he'd say other people did too, but he had the intuition that there was a place for this product in people's lives that would take advantage of 4G and pictures and music and the whole bit and integrated. And they created a $15 billion business in 1 year. I use that as an example in P&G. That's the power of an idea. Surely there must be intuition behind always discreet. It's just going out here. It's an intuition of a market opportunity, but it's also intuition that we technically can do this through the knowledge we have. So yeah, it's terribly important. And if we don't use our intuition and don't let it come to play sometime in the kind of meetings I've talked about before, where you can actually share ideas. The book that I've recommended to so many, Creativity, Inc., by Ad Catmull, talking about the history of Pixar and the development of films, makes abundantly clear the role of intuition in the creative process of making Pixar films. There's an initial piece of intuition that allows the idea to even take that first form. And then, as he tells in the book, they get together in this brain trust and they allow the intuition and experience together. Experience informs intuition, to come to play with a whole group. And that combined experience and intuitions then informs, in a non-mandatory way, the development of that story. It's magic. The challenge can be, because we're so busy and we're so challenged in terms of getting the work done, that we don't maybe take enough time for intuition. One last thing let me say on this subject of intuition. I have found that most of my best ideas, if not most, at least many, have come when I'm not at work at all. When I'm jogging on the beach slowly, very slowly, or walking in the woods. And what I'm doing at that point in time, I'm sure, is what all of us do. We're inviting our intuition to think about things. That's a very long answer to a simple question, which simply answered is intuition has a huge role to play, and we need to let it play, informed by experience and informed by other people.
How about conviction?
Well, conviction is the litmus test. Absolute conviction is. It carries the day. I talked earlier about commitment, and the other same word is conviction, because commitment grows out of conviction. And being really convinced of an idea is vital. When we went into Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and China, I would say the company, and certainly my own conviction and commitment that we were going to be the number one consumer goods company in those countries was total. And we ran into a lot of problems. We ran into unexpected losses that have been around a long time in laundry, for example. But I'd be damned if we weren't going to end up being the best company in those countries, including the leaders. And we've been through up and down, and I know we've had our challenges, but we can never give up on this commitment to be number one. Never. And if we're not number one today in laundry, and we may not be in China, we will be. Hopefully in my lifetime. But it'll certainly be in the lifetime of the people who happen to watch this tape. And that's what we have to make happen. People who have only been in P&G for 5 years, and maybe even as much as 10, obviously have just not had the experience I've had on ups and downs that we've gone through, the challenges we've faced and overcome. We don't get everything right. We never will. But we don't give up. I call it water on rock, but also if it's not working the way we are now, thinking of a new idea, a new approach, not just keep doing the same thing. But we don't give up because P&G people don't give up. That's not our character. But I think it's really important to have this history, which I know you all are compiling, of the development of our brands, to make it clear how the big ones, all our billion-dollar brands, have been the products of great technological innovation, courage, commitment to make them happen. But they have not been easily achieved, either in the first instance, where we wouldn't even have Pampers if people hadn't gone undercover to keep working on it. Same thing on Tide. And that gets us to the starting point. But none of these histories have been easy. We've had setbacks in all of them. I don't know any brand that's been around long where we haven't had setbacks where we say, why did we let that happen? Why did we let a competitor get ahead of us? Why didn't we see the consumer need? But we come back, and we look for a way to jump ahead again. And that's what we have to always do. And I'm confident we will do.
What is R&D's role in brand building?
You can just pick up wherever I start.
Yeah.
You know, the subject of brand building has been one obviously I've thought about, learned about, tried to practice for 50 years since I first joined P&G, and certainly throughout my 40-year career. And when I retired, I wrote a book called What Really Matters, which can be obtained free of cost as a PDF on the P&G website. But I started that book out really talking about brand building success factors. And I talked about 5 of them. And the first of them was a passion for providing new benefits to consumers. And I talked in there about 2 motivations which I think have driven our history throughout our entire history since we began. And that is a view of our role in life as a company, being to provide new benefits to consumers, and the recognition that the heart, the soul, the foundation of our business and its ability to grow has been providing superior benefits in our products. I have 5 success factors I talk about in this chapter. The first is that a passion providing new benefits for consumers, obviously driven by R&D. The second is a commitment to thoroughly and intimately understand consumer needs. The third is an ability to turn consumer understanding into winning strategies and business models. The fourth is to connect and develop technologies inside and outside P&G. And the fifth is the one I particularly treasure, and that is champions who create and sustain leadership brands. It's very easy as one looks at the history of our brands to somehow think that they just somehow got created. Here they are, isn't that wonderful? This technology comes together to make Bounty, to make Pampers. But that's not the way it happened. The way it happened was overcoming great challenges, in each case usually multiple, over 5, 10 years. It came because individuals involved in it, singularly or together, were committed to making it work, overcame, I'm sure, objections that we were spending too much, that we'd gone too far, we shouldn't continue on. I've always talked about brand champions, and every one of our great brands have had champions, not just in the beginning, but at multiple steps along the way. That'll probably be a good one to throw away. Yeah. Keep going.
Okay, keep your eye contact with me, just a reminder. You were chairman at Disney, obviously an innovative company. What did you learn about innovation while you were there?
The biggest thing I learned at Disney was really an affirmation of what we know to be true, and that is without innovation, without creative new products to Disney would be a movie, a new ride in the park, a new game, a new read-it book, a new television show, a new segment on ESPN. Without creativity in that, every month, every year, you're dead, absolutely dead. The pace of change in that business is every bit as great as ours. Every year you need a new movie slate. Every year you probably need a lot of new TV shows. The way people read books, the way they look at movies is changing right before our faces. If you're going to get 55 million instead of 50 million people to spend the money it takes at Disney World, You're going to have new attractions, and you're going to have to cut down on waiting times so people don't have to wait as long. So the very nature of that business underscores the importance of innovation, just as in our business. If we are improving with some incremental but some breakthrough moves of the kind that an acquisition of Pixar represents, and then having Pixar come out through multiple means, you're dead. In a more particular sense, my time on Disney allowed me to come to know Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs, who always sat just to my right as I chaired the meeting, I could tell infernally bored by most of the process going on in the meeting, brought to life the importance of innovation in many different ways. Certainly in products that came out during his time on the board, including the iPad, but also his approach to different issues that came up. For example, we were laboring over how to get rid of counterfeiting on CDs in China. And we were talking about all kinds of things, special coding, go to the government to get them to crack down. To which he said, after we went on for about 5 minutes, "You've got it all wrong," which brought the meeting to a quick stop. In which I said, "Steve, what do you have in mind?" He said, "You've got to meet them on price. They were selling for $1 and we were selling for $15. To which the finance person said, "But Steve, we won't make any money." To which he said, "You're not making any now." And he said, "You're looking at it the wrong way, because your seed DVDs will be the way you'll introduce characters and stories to Chinese consumers who will then go buy consumer products and will come to the park being built in Shanghai." There were a couple of stories regarding Steve that bear on innovation in P&G. I was with a group of P&Gers a couple of years ago, and one of them noted that I'd worked with Steve, and they asked me, what is the most singular characteristic of Steve Jobs as I experienced him? I hadn't thought about that before, but the answer was instantly clear. I said it was his maniacal commitment. Now, I can't ever recall using the word maniacal before and verbally, but that was the only word that I could think of, his maniacal commitment. Now, if you read his biography, and it's a great book by Walter Isaacson, you'd see there are probably a couple of areas where the degree of maniacalness that Steve had went a little bit beyond what you'd want for your child. But with that cheap caveat, I have never seen anyone in P&G achieve something big in R&D without a high degree of what I could describe as maniacal commitment. It's the only word for it. The person asked me, the P&Ger, "Have you seen this maniacal commitment in P&G people?" And I paused for a minute, wanting to have faces and people come into my mind, and quite a few quickly came into my mind. And I said, "Yes, I have. I have seen it. And it's a priceless characteristic." There was another story Steve told that I like because I think it describes the creative process in any form of work, including our own at P&G. He was asked in 95 or so, what was in your mind? What was driving you when you created the original Mac, white box? He answered, I love the answer, he said, "I thought we were overseeing a marriage between what society, what people needed, and what technology would offer. And I felt we had the opportunity to marry what people needed with what technology, as we understood it, could offer." And I thought when I heard that, isn't that very much what we do when we create a great new product? Are we not marrying something that people need and would benefit from with technology or some other form of an idea that brings them together to a product that we can make available to millions, hundreds of millions of people? There was another story along the same line that I liked very much that also pertains to the creative process. As Steve was explaining what was in his mind and heart as he thought about the creative process, he said this. He said, basically all we do is take things. We eat food that other people grow. We watch movies that other people make. We read books that other people have written. But if we have the opportunity to give something back that makes a difference in someone's life, that provides an experience of joy, that improves their life in some manner, I feel we're doing something really good. And isn't that really lying at the heart of any great creative work, whether it would be a sculpture, or a person writing a book, or a person creating a new laundry product, or something that would help a person in their personal appearance? I think so. Being able to give something back that improves the experience. I always remember talking to the director of Up. Up is a Pixar movie, wonderful movie. Old man, little boy, crazy man goes to the Amazon, big bird, dog, and I asked him, I was having lunch with him, and I asked him, what motivated you in doing that movie? I said, did you want to win an Academy Award? He said, sure, we'd love to win an Academy Award. That statue is beautiful. What about the financial returns? Important, we got to make money. He said, but what really I was trying to do in that movie is I was trying to express truth of experience between people in life that would somehow leave people coming out of the theater feeling, I'm glad I was there, and that it was something they would remember as a positive memory after that. And I know the whole creative process gets down to financial models, and we've got to be right financially and all, but there is in this, and what makes me love this company so much, and love the work that R&D does, it's discovering new things that make life better. And it's just not some nice-sounding slogan. It's true. I'll never forget being in an apartment in Beijing. And I was sitting on the floor, and a mom was there with her little baby, and she was serving us tea, as if we were the only people in the world. We were there to talk about Pampers and Whisper. And I asked her why she liked Pampers. And I always remember her answer. She said, it's because it makes my baby look smart. And it helps him sleep through the night. And that's good for his development. Those few words told me why we're in this business. And why, if we do our job well, and if we can make that diaper available to providing a good return for us, but one that isn't too expensive, because I could look around that room, and she could have used money for lots of things. Another piece of furniture, maybe some food that she didn't have. But it's making that difference in lives that becomes so visceral when you're with consumers. People have sometimes asked me, what did you do if you were down, if you were challenged, if you weren't feeling really up? I said 3 things. 1, I'd remind myself why we do what we do. Why we do what we do, and I'd remind ourselves of our history, of victories won and challenges overcome. 2nd, I'd get with fellow P&G employees. They'd always pick me up. I'd see what they're doing, and I'd say, they are good. And 3, I'd try to be with consumers. I'd try to be with P&G consumers, for them to tell me what we were doing well. And that same woman who I was talking to about Pampers also then brought out a package of Whisper and showed me that the end flap was not sealed. And before I got very far further in this trip, I had an email going out to somebody about checking that.
Just in today's world with, with investors and things like that, there's always increased pressure on the short term and short-term profits and things like that. And where sometimes it looks like doing the breakthrough innovation is a conflict with delivering with high certainty the short term. And how would you advise R&D leaders and presidents of business units to keep that in perspective?
I didn't hear the first part of the question. It's to keep the short and long term?
Yeah, and just the increasing pressure on the short term from a profitability, profit growth standpoint.
Certainly I'm aware of the pressure that there is today, and there's always been, perhaps greater today. I can't say for sure on the short term versus long term. It's an eternal balancing act. Obviously, we're not going to forget about the short term, but never sacrifice the long term for the short term. Don't miss the big ones. I'll always remember coming back from Europe in 1984, and our business was in really bad shape. We were at one moment losing share on dentifrice, diapers, and detergents. Fortunately, we had in the pipeline some wonderful innovations that had been developed during the prior years. We had Liquid Tide, we had Shape diapers finally coming for Pampers, and we had Crest Tartar Control in and of itself, a very controversial move, but it was ready to go. And we faced the question that year whether we would introduce all three of them at once and take the first down profit year in history since 1952, or whether we would peter the introductions out over the 2 years, not have the down year, but not have as optimum an introduction. And I remember the meeting in John Smale's office. I was running the U.S. business where we addressed this option. I think we addressed it for all of about 60 seconds before John said, of course, we are going ahead and we're going to introduce these right. And we had the down profit year. And we explained to Wall Street exactly what we were doing. And we went on from that with a series of very great years. Now, I don't mean to make that sound trivial and that you say, okay, down profit year, we'll take a down profit year. Obviously, you don't do that. You squite, you scramble. I've done it my whole career to make that quarter and make that year. But when you come to the big ones, you've got to do what's right for the long term. And you've got to invest in those islands that can produce the big win for the long term. The last thing we should be cutting, in my opinion, the last thing we should be cutting will be those upstream projects that can turn into the big moves of the future. In a way, we have to be paranoid about the future. We have to remind ourselves what happens when we don't keep the edge. I mentioned earlier what's happened to our shares on feminine protection products in Japan and in China. In such contrast to where we are in the UK and Russia and United States, I don't know if we could have avoided that. I don't know if there was someone in our R&D community who was saying, we aren't doing what we need to stay ahead of Unicharm. I don't know. I don't know if someone advanced it and someone said, but we don't have the money for that. But if they did, I hope the person who believed in it pushed really hard. And you won't win every battle even when you push. What I say is don't miss the big ones. Don't miss the big ones. And make sure you're putting enough investment out there that you have a right to expect to be able to identify the big ones and provide that small amount of money. And maybe it's not so small, to bet on the future. We've been around for what now? Is it 187 years? I don't know. And we've been here through thick and thin. And we've been here because we've been able to create the future again and again. And we've missed some. We missed Shape diapers on Pampers. We've missed a number. We missed the liquids again in China. But damn it, we got to learn from these things and make sure we don't miss the big ones. Nothing is worth missing the big ones. Eastman Kodak is out of business. Motorola 20 years ago had a 70% share of the cell phone market. It's now 4%. And we simply have to be betting on the future. And we can, and I'm confident we are. When I see something like the Always Discreet coming out, when I know the upstream paper technologies we continue to work on to up the ante on what we did with CPN, what I'm sure we're doing in the whole detergent area, I'm optimistic. Short term, long term, yes, you're going to work both. But don't ever miss what you think is the big long term hit. You'll kick yourself forever if you do that.
That's great. Thank you. Do we have all we need?
3 minutes to spare.